Welcome back to Let's Talk About It, a podcast sponsored by The Fuse and produced in the Elliott School of Communication at Wichita State University. I'm Bobby Berry.
And I'm Jessica Newman. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our third episode, and today we're discussing the all-important and very often underestimated topic of financial literacy. So joining us today is Shilu Surinder, Director of Financial Aid here at Wichita State University. Thanks for coming, Shilu. And then we also have Alexis Scott, who is the Financial Aid Advisor and Outreach Coordinator here on campus. So thank you as well, Alexis.
Absolutely.
So Shilu, let's start with you. Would you mind just explaining your role as the Director of Financial Aid and maybe tell us a little bit about why you chose this specific career path?
Sure. So my role at the university as Director of Financial Aid and Scholarships really is oversight and management of the financial aid process. And that's really the distribution, the awarding of financial aid to all of our students. But beyond that, it's also entails a lot of compliance related issues, because when you're awarding federal financial aid, as you can imagine, the federal government has a lot of rules attached to that. So that's the part that's about federal financial aid. I also manage an office of 21 people, 21 fabulous financial aid administrators who really handle the day-to-day work. So while I have oversight, it's a team of folks that do this good work.
So you're saying you're not busy really at all?
Not at all.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And why did you choose to follow this?
So I don't know that I chose it. It kind of chose me.
Happens often here.
Yes, yeah. So my undergrad really was in international business and business administration, and I was working for a corporation doing finance and accounting related work, and I thought that I was going to go into international business, and that's where my path would take me. But as often is the case, you change careers, and for me that happened kind of I guess just by the nature of the work that I was doing. The company left Wichita and I chose not to move, and I wanted to stay here in Wichita. So then that kind of led me down another path. I thought, let me do some self-reflection on if this is what I really wanted to do, because when you're working in finance, it's a lot of individual one-on-one work, and I wanted to really work with others. And so when I started at Wichita State in the Office of Financial Aid, I was a loan counselor. And so that got me to start working with students. And I really discovered my passion. And that's one-on-one interaction with students. And then as I realized the work that we're doing, it's about what I had personally, because my parents really pushed me to education and the value of education. And I saw that many of our students don't have that support, and I loved being there to provide that access and support. So as I did scholarships and continue to work with students, I knew this was what I was meant to do.
Well, that sounds really interesting to me, and I didn't know that about you, Sheila. So thank you for that. That was really important and fascinating for me specifically. But Alexis, I know you've been on this campus for a few years now, at least, but from a different perspective. And so, what I think is interesting is your student perspective, and now you being an individual who also works in the Office of Financial Aid. What drew you to that role specifically that you have in financial aid?
Well, what drew me was the next step. So I started off in admissions and I was a recruiter, and it was easy to sell my story. You know, I could get people to come to Wichita State. That was the easy part. The hard part was once they came to Wichita State, then what? You know, when we started talking about numbers, when we started talking about, you know, what does tuition look like? What does scholarships look like? I realized, well, I need to assist there. And so that's what drew me to one, expanding my horizon. You know, I have a passion for higher education, and there's so many different facets of it. And so when I realized recruiting the students was one step, but that next step is how do you retain them? And a lot of times finances is one of the reasons why we don't retain students. You know, they simply can't afford it. So I became an advisor, and then the outreach coordinator piece came with it just because I love outreach. I get to work with counselors, other departments across campus, you know, and provide additional resources for our students.
With that being said, your engagement with students, what are some of those questions, those financial questions that the students probably ask you most frequently? What are you hearing from them?
So one of the most frequent questions that I get is, where do I start? And as cliche or as broad as that may sound, a lot of students don't know where to start. You know, we have a lot of additional resources online, and that's where I take them. I literally, whether it's on my phone, if they catch me in passing, or if it's actually sitting down with them and turning my computer and saying, okay, we're gonna walk this through step by step. I want you to even utilize my mouse, and I want you to be able to click so that you can kind of get some memory on where to access these resources. Online, we have literally hundreds of scholarships waiting for students to apply to them, and oftentimes they don't. And so that's one of the main questions: where do I start? Sometimes we utilize the example of holding someone's hand, but sometimes it's actually, no, you get behind them and you can, whisper what's the next direction, because sometimes the holding the hand, they can shut their eyes and not even look at what you're actually doing. They just open their eyes, and next thing you know, a dollar amount has now entered into their account. But when you're not there, when the advisor needs a break, or you advance, in your career, they're still left and stuck with that question. So that's one of the main ones. I would say another question that I get often is, I don't know what to ask. And that's really a statement. And so as an advisor, you have to kind of go beyond that a little bit. That's the portion of advising. So you advise them to say, okay, I realize that, you don't know where to go from here, or you're saying, well, I think this is it, this is all. But as the advisor, you have to open up that can of worms, per se. And I know people oftentimes don't want to do that, but I'm one of those type of advisors. I'm going to. We're going to open up the can of worms together. And so instead of saying, is this all, I think I got it, I always encourage my students to ask, what's next? Okay, after this application has been submitted, what does follow-up, look like? How do I reach out to them? So those would be kind of my top two that I would share with you, that I pretty much see, across the board, no matter if it's returning adult students, incoming freshmen. I know I even had that same question, literally from start all the way to finish. Those are some of the questions I see.
Absolutely, and that's why I was really happy when you took that role, because I think someone who's been a student on this campus and then goes into a role of being able to help and assist students, they have an understanding of what that felt like when they were on the other side of that table, and I think they bring a unique perspective to that role. So I'm really excited and happy that you're where you are right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I love, Alexis, that you mentioned how some students just say they don't know what to ask, because I think we get into this mindset, we want to help students and we just say things like, just let me know if you need me, let me know, and like as an instructor on our campus, I imagine that would be similar to me getting up in front of my class and saying, do you have any questions before I lecture, and like they have no idea if they have questions. So asking that next question and making sure that they understand what they don't know is so important. And I love that you've recognized that and that you're working on that. So kudos to you for that. Shilu, so you kind of oversee all of these things. You oversee different processes and all these different applications for aid. So among loans and grants and scholarships and other types of aid, what type of aid do you often see utilized the most in your office?
So at Wichita State, approximately 70% of our students are on some type of aid. That could be grants, which most of our grants, Pell Grant eligible students, are our highest need students. So Pell Grants are an entitlement program. You file the FAFSA. If you demonstrate low enough financial need or low enough estimated family contribution number, then you would qualify for a Pell Grant. There are also other grants that you could qualify for, but that's limited funding. And so we're talking about approximately $6,000 to $7,000 if you were a zero EFC or estimated family contribution and the highest need student, and that would be all grant funding. We know that a typical resident student has about $22,000 in cost of attendance. And cost of attendance is tuition and fees, it's room and board, it's books, it's miscellaneous expenses, it's personal expenses. Students still have to buy shampoo and deodorant, all those things. So we factor that in because we want to get the student the most aid that they are possibly eligible for. Well, beyond grants, then they could be eligible if they're a high need student for work study. So that's where they could have a campus job, work on campus, and the department pays 75%. The department pays 25%. the federal allocation is 75%. So that's a win for the student as well as for the offices on campus. And so that's a way that, again, this is gift resources or work resources where a student doesn't have to pay it back. Then, of course, the biggest number is the student loans. Because all students typically can qualify for a loan. Some of it's need-based, some of it's non-need-based. So any student could qualify for a non-need-based loan. So for that fact alone, the majority of students will qualify for some loan funds. And then the high need students will qualify for the grant funds and work study. So the final part of that is scholarships, of course. And we have a lot of our students who qualify for a variety of scholarships, both internal to the university and external scholarships. For example, last year alone, our students brought in nearly over $2 million of external scholarships. And coming forward this year, we will have additional opportunities for students to apply for even more external scholarships, as well as institutional scholarships. We disperse over $105 million annually in all of these programs. So that's why 70% of our students are on some type of aid.
That's excellent. There's a lot of numbers there. So, the 2 million was external scholarships, the 105 million was total aid. Do you have a number on how many merit-based scholarships we award institutionally speaking each year?
So a combination of merit-based and need-based, we award about $19 million annually in aid. And that's a credit to our administration and also our foundation, the WSU Foundation, who really have been going out and seeking additional need-based scholarships. So our programs for a while, we started out with merit-based, but our focus now is really on affordability and trying to meet the gap of tuition and fees for our students. And so that is need-based aid that we are growing in all areas. And so that our students who have that financial need, even though they have grant funds that they're getting, there's also a gap between the grant funds and the tuition and fees costs. So being that those are our highest need students, we want to make up that difference with some type of need-based scholarship. So I would encourage all students to file the FAFSA, because even if students don't think that they have eligibility to get anything more than loans, it's filing the FAFSA, and if we can see that there's some financial need there, then we can also consider them for need-based scholarships.
Okay, that's something people usually just don't know. Wow.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't even really know. So keeping in line with that, Sheelu, in each of our podcasts, we have addressed COVID in some aspect. And so on our campus specifically, how have you seen COVID impact the way in which students engage with your office? Have you seen that change yet?
Well, early on, when we went to online learning in the spring, we were offered or awarded CARES Act funding. So with that CARES Act funding, then we were able to do some emergency grants to students. And so that was our initial interaction related to COVID, because students started applying to us, letting us know that they were experiencing job loss, especially students who were working on campus. They obviously, when they went online, then they no longer had a job that they could go, or students that were working in different areas, non-work study related, but different on-campus jobs, they suddenly didn't have money for rent or food. And so we worked to try to get those students some immediate emergency aid. Our foundation also raised funds for that we were able to award, because the CARES Act funding was restricted to domestic students. And so we then turned around and were able to use the foundation Chakras Up funding for our students who were international students or our online students. So that was a tremendous help to us in terms of the students that were reaching out. The other thing that we were able to do is that we have a process called professional judgment. And that's where when you file the FAFSA, it's on past income information from your previous year's tax return. So when COVID hit and you had this job loss situation or immediate needs, then students could come in and either physically, or we also opened up and had Zoom appointments that students could contact our office and share what their needs are, what they were experiencing. And we could either offer emergency funding or that professional judgment process to reevaluate their FAFSA information to see if they could have either additional grant aid or be eligible for additional grant aid, or maybe some additional loan funds.
Wow. That's to me, that's a huge testament to your office. And we talk about being an institution that's able to adapt. And I think adapting that quickly and that efficiently to really make sure that we're serving the needs of our students, definitely kudos to you guys and your team over there for sure. And
definitely kudos to our teams, because we've been talking a long time about paperless access, where students can reach out to us and communicate with us. That's been difficult to do when you're inundated with all the work that already happens, but all of a sudden we were forced to. And my team really just flexible and adaptable to the situation. They were able to pivot, change to an online format for Zoom appointments. And really the traffic in the office has not been that much. The traffic has been through Zoom and phone calls, where now people have really quick access to our office. So setting up an appointment with an advisor and having communication about what's going on in their life, that's important, because we won't know until you tell us.
Right.
And so once you tell us, then we can figure out together what some options are. And not that it's always an option, our office obviously has limited funds, so it's not always going to be that we can offer additional grant aid or additional scholarships, but we will try to fill the gap where we can, and then we connect our students with other resources. We partner with Office of Diversity and Inclusion, or we partner with Student Affairs and the care team, and there's other resources on campus or off campus that we can refer students to. So until we know that they're struggling, and in our case it's financial struggles, we're not able to help them. So that's where students have to connect with our office to let us know, and then we will help them figure it out.
And that's something I'd love to talk a little bit more about, is that, you said that you don't know until they tell you, and that you want to hear about their life and these sorts of things. And we all know that finances are not easy to talk about. It can be embarrassing, it can be stressful, it can be, any of these things. And Alexis, especially for you, having just been on this campus, as an undergrad 3 years ago, what is it like, or maybe how do you help students when maybe they are nervous to engage with you, or ashamed, or any of those feelings that come with money?
I'm glad that you asked me that question. One of the things that I always do, whether I'm meeting with students in their families in person or virtually, I always tell them to take a deep breath, in and out. And I always try to include, in your small personal bubble, just to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. But I share my personal story. A lot of times, people want to hear that I'm not the only one that's dealing with this situation, and that kind of speaks to your expertise, if you will, on the subject matter. So whether that's scholarships or grants or loans or whatever the case may be, when you open up to the student, or trying to calm a parent down about their student having to take out loans or whatever the situation may be, that eliminates some of those natural barriers. Anytime you're talking about finances, specifically we're speaking about federal aid here, but if someone was going to a bank to get a loan, if they're getting ready to buy a car, a house, finances, they can make you cringe no matter what. So you have to, as the advisor, remember, what was that like for you? Each of our advisors, have had some type of contact with a student directly, or them themselves as the student, and it's you taking that time to reflect and say, when I was in that seat, when I was in that situation, what were some of the things that I was afraid about? You know, a lot of times students, they're afraid of judgment, you know, so I took out some loans and I didn't quite, you know, spend it correctly, or, you know, I had a job, but actually I took a spring break trip with that job, you know, but that's the realities that we're facing, you know, and it's about just acknowledging that, you know, we're not going to always make the right decision the first time, maybe not even the second time, and unfortunately, maybe not the third time either. But it's about, you know, when you're advising, meeting with a student virtually or in person, remember to put yourself in that seat. And I always encourage our advising team, if you feel comfortable enough to share a little bit about yourself. Again, that's breaking down that barrier. And you can literally see the presence of heaviness lift off of people, because it's like, okay, you do understand what I'm going through. Yeah. Right. You understand.
I love that. That's incredible. There's a lot of empathy, I think, that you guys just innately have to have. I mean, we all do that work with students, but particularly when you're working with a topic like this. Sticking kind of with that buzzword of financial literacy, why do you feel like it's so important for students to learn this type of skill sooner rather than later? And in what ways do you guys support students in that endeavor of learning good financial literacy? And that's for Alexis.
So you mentioned a statement earlier, and we hear it all the time. You don't know what you don't know. And so when we talk about what financial literacy is, if you were to go into the Radigan Student Center and walk up to a student and ask, a lot of times they're going to look at you kind of like confused, and they're going to ask you, well, can you elaborate, you know, or they're straight up tell you, I don't know what that means. And I think the important thing to remember here is that financial literacy for each student is going to be different. Because if I'm a student that, you know, has, need-based aid, or if I'm a student who only qualifies for loans, if I'm a graduate student who only qualifies for unsubsidized loans, that's 3 different types of students that has to know different avenues down what it means to be financially literate in their different areas. And so, you know, it's one of those kind of things you have to be quick on your feet. You look at a student's account and you say, okay, what does financial literacy mean for this student? Or we go out into the community and speak to different schools, you know, certain demographics we talk to. And so thinking ahead and saying, okay, for these students, what could they possibly need to know regarding their financial situation? When it comes to federal aid, it can change each year for students. You know, Shilu had mentioned professional judgments. That can change a student's financial situation in a semester. And so understanding where is that student at, what are the different avenues that they need to be considering, and then essentially guiding them into that information there. There's a lot of things I did not know, you know, I was a transfer student to Wichita State. And I tell this story all the time. I received a transfer merit scholarship coming from Butler to Wichita State, and I was so excited. And one thing I didn't know, and I'm sure that it was told to me several times, right? I'm sure when I went in and accepted my merit scholarship as a transfer student, I'm sure I read this somewhere. And I didn't keep up my GPA. And therefore, the next semester, that aid wasn't there. And I was frustrated. I was like, okay, what's going on here? And I sat down with a financial aid advisor, and she made it very plain and clear to me, you know, here's what happened. This was the portion of the deal, you know, that you didn't keep up, and that was about keeping your grades up. And at the time, you know, life happened. I had a grandmother that I was close to that passed away. I was a student athlete taking 18 to 21 credit hours. Please do not do that if you're a student listening, unless you have some tools and resources, of course. But there was a lot that was going on. And so, you know, as students, we have to take on that responsibility that, although at that time I did not know, but now I'm aware of this. And so there's a responsibility that comes with when you know better, you do better. But as the advisor, you know, sometimes because we have that empathy, you know, sometimes we can get a little soft-hearted and we're like, okay, you know, maybe they really didn't know. And with my students, I tell them, you know, when you leave out of my office today, I tell them all the time, I'm going to make a note on your account. That's gonna serve as a notice that you left out of here with the information that you need in order to be successful. And I make sure to get a head nod, a blink or two, or a thumbs up or something that says, okay, I understand. And if they kind of leave or they're getting ready to leave with a confused look, I say, no, come on back. Let's sit back down. I have time. And let's go over this again until it makes sense.
So one of the things that I have noticed, and just talking about that emotional connection and that attachment to the conversation at hand of that of financial literacy, Sheila, I'm going to address this last question to you. So when you think about the stress that financial worry adds to a college experience, in what ways has Wichita State tried their best to decrease some of that financial stress on our students here?
So I feel like we have started that process in terms of decreasing it, and it's about education, helping students understand that our office is there to help. So we try to communicate that. We're out there sharing information. For example, today is October 1. It is the release of the new FAFSA for the 21-22 academic year. So students who are interested in getting the access to the most financial aid that they are eligible for, October is the month to file the FAFSA. Now, people get stressed about that because, oh my gosh, I don't understand. It's a lot of information. I tell my staff to put themselves in the shoes of the students. Think of when you have to file your taxes. It's kind of, you get apprehensive. Oh, those documents I have to pull together. This is what I have to do. So relate that back to the student filing the FAFSA, especially our first generation students who are first time students. They may not know what to do. So to really communicate with them, to help ease that stress in terms of that communication and helping them understand that it's a process and it takes steps and that we are here to help them through those steps. We've also really partnered with other offices on campus. So for example, the CARE team and Student Affairs and Alicia Newell and Alicia Sanchez, their offices, we have told them as students go to them with these financial stresses and financial needs to refer those students to our office, to contact our office on behalf of these students so that that stress is reduced for them because they know that somebody is working on their behalf. And then we'll partner with them. We've done emergency book scholarships or emergency scholarships for a short-term kind of situation. Now we'll ask for information from the student because we want to know what's going on and what their situation is. But our office is now, we have more tools and resources to be able to offer and fill that gap in when there are these stressors. And like I said before, it's not that we can always help, but we'll communicate and dialogue with the student and find resources for them.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. You guys have given us so much information. You know, some of it I knew, from as someone who started in admissions as well, but some of it I didn't know. And thinking about the fact that, Bobby and I both worked on this campus for a while, and you told us some things we didn't know. So if we think about the students in that regard of, man, they're in over their heads. So it's awesome that we have people like you to meet them where they are. So I just want to thank you guys for coming on the show. I think it's been really valuable, and just thank you so much. We appreciate you.
And I'm happy because I know both of these women very personally, and these are two of the most compassionate women that I've ever met. So for you guys to be working in the areas that you are, I think that is nothing but a complete asset to our students. So once again, thank you for your time. We look forward to hearing more from you guys in the future.
All right, next we have the opportunity to hear about financial literacy more from the student perspective. So joining us on today's episode is Jang Bui and Kevin Dow. Thank you both so much for finding the time to visit with us, and just thanks for agreeing to share your perspective on paying for college.
Happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So once again, thank you guys for your willingness to answer these questions and have a conversation about financial literacy with us today. So for Jang, you're pursuing your master's in educational psychology, specifically in the area of higher education student affairs, correct?
Yes.
But you're also the financial wellness graduate assistant, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of titles there. And with your role as a financial wellness graduate assistant, what does that job actually entail?
Yeah, my role as the financial wellness graduate assistant really means that I am creating and implementing, developing programs for students. And so that entails outreach to students and really looking into the research behind things and then understanding what students need. So in our office, we say financial education for students by students. And so we know best what students need. And so in my role and other things that I do, I plan and execute different events and workshops. I also meet one-on-one with students, and I also supervise 2 amazing peer financial coaches.
Wow. It was something that even myself as attending Wichita State as an undergraduate student, that opportunity wasn't here. So I'm really glad that that whole mindset and that concept of teaching students from a student's perspective, I think that's brilliant, and I think that's genius, and I think that's really a great way to really make sure that students are actually being able to understand and comprehend what they're learning, to really hopefully make them a little bit more successful in that area of finances.
Yeah, and I love that wellness is in your title. You know, Bobby and I were talking about when we did our episode on wellness for the podcast, you know, talked about including financial wellness, but they're like, well, finances are so big, let's put it in its own category. But it really is a sense of wellness. So I think that's really cool that they put that in to your title. So, you know, there's a lot of resources that come from what you do. Are there any specific services or resources that have that you've seen be the most utilized by students?
Yeah, from the time that I've been here, the most utilized service would be our tax support. And so we don't do the taxes for the students, but we help guide them through the process to do their taxes, all for free. So for our international students, we use a system called Glacier, which is a software paid from the international office. We help them do their federal and their state taxes as well. For our resident students, we use a software through United Way because that's where we're trained. And although it's free for our services, the software may charge depending on what they're filing. But I found that it's really useful, especially during this whole pandemic as well with the, the IRS extending it to July. We had so many students and we had to work with them on Zoom to get it done. But we are finding that even now we're still helping students with taxes because with our international students, they have to mail it in, and with everything going on with the pandemic and with the mail system, it's getting stuck behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And from all these experiences that you've had, do you feel like it's made you more financially attuned, so to speak, by doing this work?
Definitely. Prior to my role, I knew about financial literacy, but I didn't really reflect on it as much as I do now. So I grew up in a first-generation low-income family, and so I was never taught about finances except for don't spend money, shop in sales. And so my parents, they don't know English, and so majority of their life they spend using cash. And so growing up, I had to learn the hard way about finances. And then when I came into this role, especially as a grad student, I had to really adjust my spending because I was getting paid salary as a teacher.
Sure.
And then I had to readjust my spending, and then I feel like I'm handling it a lot better now because I'm constantly reflecting everything I'm telling the students. I'm like, okay, I should do that too, and then I'm constantly learning new things about financial literacy as I grow up because it's a lifelong skill.
That's great.
I think even for me, growing up, and I think that was one of the things that I was really excited about being able to do this topic, was finances is something that's really not often talked about. And no matter what perspective you come from, I think it always helps to have that additional information and that additional support. So once again, I really appreciate you guys being here. So with Kevin, hello, by the way.
Hey.
I'm really excited that you're here because I was actually on the committee when we chose you to come.
I know he was in the room interviewing me.
Yes. So it's really good to see you. So you are now a junior accounting major. But once again, you're also one of the recipients of the Harry Gore Memorial Scholarship, which makes you a Gore Scholar. So congratulations once again on that accomplishment.
Thank you.
So what does the title of a Gore Scholar mean to you?
Well, honestly, it means a lot. Let's see, after winning the Gore Scholarship, I was honestly just so shocked. But the next year after I won it, when we were all in the same room with the other Gore Scholars and the past Gore Scholars and alumni, that's where it really came out. And it was apparent to how, Gores were held to a higher standard at Wichita State, and just seeing the effects of the Gore Scholarship and how much it just accelerates you, not only financially, but you're just networking and surrounding yourself with with the current Gore Scholars and the alumni too, but just having access to that pool of people, honestly, it just means a lot. But with the Gore Scholarship, it's just entirely different from other scholarships too. There's no GPA requirement. There's no number of certain credit hours you have to take. There's really not a lot of restrictions with the scholarship. It's kind of money that's given to you with the expectation that you kind of give back on campus at Wichita State, and to alleviate a lot of the financial stress that that loans and everything else, the tuition has on a student. So
I know that competition itself is a very stressful.
Oh yeah.
Very stressful competition. So I definitely much respect and much gratitude for me being on the other end as a person who's on the selection committee, to be able to see some of you guys speak so passionately about how you want to give back to the campus and some of the things that you guys aspire to. It was very inspiring to me as a professional to be able to hear some of your stories. So once again, thank you for that.
Yeah, and while I did not sit on the committee like he did, I do remember I got to take your headshot. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that.
It was my last year of getting to take headshots. I did that for about 5 or 6 years in admissions. So, and again, yeah, when I watched that competition, I'm like, I'm in my 30s and I'd be terrified to do this. So you guys are amazing. And just so everyone knows, there were 400 plus students in your round or that year of the Gore Scholarship. So
627.
Oh, really?
The amount? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that year.
Well, our producer Andrew wrote 400 plus, so he's fired. It was 600 plus. Just kidding. It just grows every single year. Like I remember, this will age me, but back when it was, I didn't do it, but back when it was that time, I was a transfer student, so I wasn't eligible. We had 200 in it, and it just keeps growing. Yeah.
Wow.
Every single
That's
year.
crazy.
So that's been a couple years ago now. So you've had a couple years to kind of soak in the achievement and sort of get used to Wichita State. So now, how would you say that you've been affected by the Gore Scholarship? And more than that even, how do you think it's going to impact you long term after college?
I mean, I think to answer that question, I would kind of have to go back to my background and upbringing growing up. I grew up in a low income family myself too. Both my parents were immigrants, and kind of similar to Chang, I wasn't taught a lot of financial literacy growing up as well. So my freshman year, upon receiving the scholarship, I'm like, wow, this is a lot of money, right? That first year I went out and blew it all. I spent it on tuition, everything like that. I bought, like a laptop and stuff for college and everything like that. But not really learning the value of $1 from my parents. It really just came out. But over time with the scholarship, it's really accelerated me a lot. I've learned a lot about financial literacy, how to budget that money, how to properly invest and do my finances as well. Definitely it's accelerated my financial literacy a lot. It's put me in a much better position than what I would have been. Right now I'm receiving almost full Pell Grant. That's what I was receiving my freshman year too. But really, I think one of the most important parts of the competition was just all the networking and all the people I've met through that. I like saying that your net worth is your network. And so a lot of the people I met through that scholarship competition, I do business with today. I've created businesses with. They've helped me through a lot of my endeavors. And then, I shout out to my mom at the time because, growing up, sometimes like she wouldn't eat just so I could eat. And so, learning the value of $1 back then compared to now, I think you learn a lot. So,
if you don't mind me asking, what does having that title of a Gore Scholar, the pressure and the recognition of that name and that scholarship, did you feel a lot of pressure once you were officially named, kind of going forward, that you have these expectations to live up to during your academic career?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever struggle with just some of those pressures at all?
Yeah, I did. I honestly did feel like I struggled with a lot of the pressures of being a Gore Scholar, kind of being initiated into the group. A lot of the Gore Scholars, automatically, look to join Student Ambassador Society. They look to all studying abroad and everything like that. I'd say most of the past Gore Scholars just ended up studying abroad anyways. That's something I plan on doing. But I mean, with being a Gore Scholar, again, a lot of the expectation is that you kind of volunteer on campus, that you give back to campus in a way. So there were definitely a lot of pressures with that.
I appreciate that. I think sometimes that's maybe not the lens that most people look at it through. Is just what that additional stress and pressure. So you win this competition, you have these finances to think about. You have your own life. You're trying to figure out yourself, and you're still so young. You're entering college for the first time. So thank you for that transparency. So Jane, I want to know specifically for you, what has been the most rewarding part of your job?
The students. Honestly, the students I get to meet and interact with and hear their stories, it really inspires me to be, a better, person, a better graduate assistant in my role, just to find more resources for them. And, I can't necessarily give them money where I'm at, but I can help them understand money. And sometimes when I'm breaking down what they're spending, even though it's a hard topic, I can feel a release out of them, okay, I have the next steps. And not only that, but I'm following up with them. I'm making sure that I'm their accountability partner. I'm going to check on you every month until we can get your habits right. And so being able to meet with the students from all different walks of life, from first-year students to transfer, returning adult students even, it's good to hear their stories, and then it's also even better to educate them. And naturally, I'm a teacher at heart, and so I love to teach and create those connections.
I know that, the work that you guys are doing, this type of engagement wasn't at this institution 15 to 20 years ago, honestly, and maybe not even 10 years ago. And so now, with all of this additional knowledge and expertise in this area, what are 3 tips that you would give to maybe a student who's never visited your office before, someone who maybe doesn't know the work that you guys do? What would be 3 tips that you would give?
So 3 tips I would give is to really plan for your spending. As much as you plan, time management, as much as you plan different events going on in your life, you need to also plan for how you're spending and understanding what money you're bringing in and what money you're bringing out. And so once you understand that piece of it, everything will continue on. So it's continuous progress. The next tip is kind of personal, but the next tip is just don't fall for, when you're at the cash register and they're trying to get you to open up a credit card. I feel like a lot of students, when I talk about credit, they're like, oh yeah, I almost opened up an account. And so they don't realize that even them looking up, their social security, it also affects their credit score. And so that's one thing I try to tell students to watch out for, is really understanding what fees are out there, what you're getting yourself into, especially when it comes to credit. And then the last tip would definitely be to practice. Keep practicing. It's a skill, it's a lifelong skill, but practice with grace. It's okay to have some slip-ups here and there, but give yourself that room to grow and to reflect.
I'm curious because what made you even choose? You already know where I'm going with this. What made you choose for this to be a role that you chose to apply for? What about this role connected with you to that extent? Because you speak very passionately about it. You speak very intentionally about it as well. So I'm just curious, where does that come from?
Yeah, I remember back to graduate weekend when we were all interviewing for different offices and different graduate assistantships. I really connected with not only the Office for Student Money Management, but the office it's under, with the Office of Student Success. And so I believe with the Office for Student Money Management, it ties into our whole experience being students. I felt like I didn't receive that much, education as an undergrad, and I want to make sure that I continue that support for students so that after they graduate, they're not stuck and they're not like, wow, I didn't learn anything in school. And so I want to be able to offer that for them.
That's amazing.
That's so great. Bobby's absolutely right. You speak very intentionally. And I'm sitting over here looking at my Starbucks cup and I'm like, okay, I need to go see Jang and she needs to keep me accountable for my spending. And, because really this information is stuff that like I wish I knew, when I was 18 or younger than that even. And we talked about this in our financial literacy our first generation is where we talked about it with Kay about just wishing this stuff was taught in high school. You know what I mean? These kind of like life skills sort of thing. So I think that's great what you're doing. It's very, very cool. Kevin, on the topic of kind of advice and tips, what type of advice would maybe you give to younger students, specifically when it comes to applying for financial aid, whether that's scholarships or grants or anything like that, just handling that process?
The top tip I would definitely have is seek help. That's definitely my number one tip. I feel like without the assistance of some key people at Wichita State, I wouldn't be here today speaking with you guys. I wouldn't have any of the scholarships or any of the grants I would have today without, assistance with FAFSA. In my family, there really wasn't any urgency to fill the FAFSA or anything, especially in high school. But when all the financial advisors came around from Wichita State, and I asked them a lot of questions about the process and everything, they were just there to help me. One person that really stuck out to me was Ricky Ellison. Shout out to her.
Woo-woo.
I think I remember sitting there in high school filling out the DSI application with her and admissions application and everything like that. But as Jang mentioned, financial literacy is a lifelong skill. It's something you need to constantly practice and improve on. It's not something that's taught in school. Although I did take a financial literacy class in high school, I'm going to be honest, I don't think I learned a lot from the class. It's something that's either taught the easy way or the hard way, and you retain the information, either learning it one of those two ways. And so a lot of that does come down to self-practice, but a lot of that at the same time can be taught with seeking help and talking to the necessary people.
I think that's key, the seeking help and the conversations, and I think that was the whole intention even behind our mindset for this podcast, is having those conversations, because even Jessica and I being, working professionals and adults, there's still things that I think we have learned from every person that we have talked to thus far.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, I'm excited that our students and our campus community get to hear, from you guys directly how these things are impacting your life. And so once again, I just want to say thank you guys so much for a great conversation. Kevin, it was great to see you again. Jang, it was definitely nice to get to know you. And I've heard great things about you, so I definitely see those 100%.
She lives up to the hype.
Absolutely. So once again, thank you guys for being a part of our financial literacy episode today. And we just want to say thank you. And then Jang, do you have a website? So for students who maybe want to have some additional information on your area and what you do, what's a great way for us to be able to connect them to you?
Yeah, so if you look up like Office for Student Money Management, I believe it's OSMM, so we also say awesome because talking about money is awesome.
Nice.
So just looking that up at wichita.edu.
All right, thank you so much.
Excellent. Well, yes, I will reiterate, thank you again. Bobby and I, when we got started with this, at least for me, I think I underestimated how much I was going to learn from people. I was like, we need to share this with the students. We need to educate people. And here I'm like, this is amazing. Like, we're learning so much. So we've gotten to talk to just some really amazing individuals, on this show and then so far this season. So we just want to thank you. And finally, we'd also love to hear from those of you who are listening. So whether you're keeping up with Let's Talk About It on Spotify or Anchor, Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, we'd love to hear your feedback on the show. If there are additional topics that we haven't covered that you would like to hear about, maybe you have a special person that who you think would be great on the show, just let us know what's on your mind, and be sure to join us next time on Let's Talk About It.